If worldwide affairs have a place in your day, this is the place you will want to stay. The Ron Bobb-Semple International Podcast with your host, world-renowned voice of Garvey and global news commentator, Ron Bobb-Semple.
Greetings and welcome to the Ron Bobb-Semple International Podcast. We will be addressing global issues that impact our day-to-day lives.
Parenting or child rearing is the process of promoting and supporting the physical, emotional, social, and intellectual development of a child from infancy to adulthood. Parenting refers to the intricacies of raising a child and not exclusively for a biological relationship. Joining us to dissect her book, The 4 R's of Parenting, Conversations with Parents, Young Adults, and Elders, is Dr. Carmen Bynoe Bovell. Dr. Bovell, greetings and welcome to the Ron Bobb-Semple International Podcast.
Thank you, Ron. It's quite a privilege for me to be interviewed by you on this book. I'm so happy to have this opportunity. Thank you.
You're very much welcome. Look at your childhood through the lens of the parent that you are, not the lens of the child that you were. How did your parents or role models teach you?
Well, I grew up in a very, very loving family. Touchy-feely, kissy, supportive, offering a lot of guidance, strict guidance, however. You know how Guyanese parents used to be, and perhaps some still are. Very strict. We were taught to take care of each other, look out for each other, be friendly, be nice, be kind. That's how my people were. And so I believe we all have grown up to be loving, kind, taking care of each other, taking care of people, being concerned. I'm very glad that I turned out this way, and not all 6 of us kids, but the majority of us. Every child has his or her own personality.
Absolutely.
Yes.
How did they interact with you?
My parents?
Yes.
Their interactions, I determined as loving and kind. They spoke, not in a very harsh way. I grew up with my grandmother. My parents were living nearby and my other siblings. But I grew up with my grandmother because my mother gave me to her. I was a sickly child. And because my mother had 4 others at that time, she couldn't take care of me. So she gave me to my gram. And my gram was a very religious lady. She sang a lot of religious hymns. But I think the thing that influenced me most about my upbringing was the fact that my gram prayed every night. And I slept on the bed beside her after her husband died. I slept on the bed beside her and she prayed. She prayed for each and every member of the family, calling them by name. And so I grew up hearing that, and I grew up knowing that my gram cared about people. She left me for last. Oh my God. And them prayers that she sent up for me, boy. Oh my God. Thank God. I could not go astray having heard all of that. And my mother was very gentle. Grandmother was gentle. The thing about my grandmother that impressed me as well is that she had a front gallery to her house. And everybody who came to number 78 Village, Skeldon, and didn't have a place to stay, Gram would give them a pillow and a blanket or something to put on the ground, and they slept there. Very impressive.
Being an intentional parent means being mindful of your actions and owning up to them when we know we were in the wrong, even if who we have wronged was our own children. Does your definition, Dr. Bovell, of intentional parenting differ in any way from that description?
I wouldn't say it differs. I would say it expands upon it, because for me, intentional parenting means parenting with intention, knowing the values that you want your child to inculcate and modeling those values for them. intentionally being respectful to your kids, because respect goes a long way in this world. Those values that I quoted in the book. The book is based on the 4 values of respect, responsibility, reciprocity, and restraint. And so you, as a parent, as you relate to your child or children, you model those values so that they can learn them through interacting with you and other members of the family. Hopefully everybody in the family, parents, if grandparents are there, aunts and uncles, we treat each other respectfully. So the child looking at that, experiencing that, will acquire that style of behavior, that value. So you intentionally, what you want your child to learn, to be, to become, you intentionally, you do it. You do those things. I am not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's easy at all, especially when it comes to the value of restraint, learning self-control and behaving in a self-controlled manner. Most of the parents I interviewed for this book said that was a challenge for them. You know, parents get angry, especially when they're under stress. You know, we say in Guyana, they take it out on them, picnic. They take it out on them, they slap, they hit, they use harsh tones of voice and so on. So yeah, we got to model it. That's the intent, for them to learn these values that I am modeling. Oh, and they do learn, believe me, they do learn.
Is unintentional parenting just as effective?
Oh, of course, of course. You have children and you don't know what you want for them. You don't know the values you want to transmit to them. You don't know how you want to mold them and shape them. So what are you going to do? Or perhaps you as a parent don't understand the importance of your behavior. And so you do and say anything, not realizing that your child is watching. Children watch and observe parents 100% of the time they're with you. They hear you on the telephone, right? They hear you talking. If you have parents, 2 parents, they hear the parents talking to each other. They're observing how you're treating each other. They're observing how you're talking about your friends, your neighbors, and they're observing your reactions to certain things. That's what they're learning. They are learning to behave in the same way. So yeah, of course, whatever you do, you may not intend, and then you're going to turn around and say, I don't know where that child learned that from. I don't know where that child picked that up from.
As you mentioned a few moments ago, Dr. Bovell, the 4 R's that you write about in your book are respect, responsibility, reciprocity, and restraint.
Yes.
If you were to grade them, which would you say could have the least impact on a child-parent relationship?
I would not want to grade, because if you look at the cover of the book, you will see that they are interconnected, because you see those yellow arrows going back and forth, linking them. So you can't separate them. They are linked. And I've been asked, which one do you think is the most important? It's a difficult question for me to answer, but I've answered it because the people who are in the panel with me all said respect was number 1, because if you have self-respect, you will treat other people with respect. And if you respect yourself and others, you're going to be responsible, you're going to exercise self-control or restraint, and you're going to do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which is the golden rule, which is reciprocity. So some people believe that respect is number 1. And sometimes I agree. And if you are a responsible person, you will respect yourself. And, you know, I've tried to shift them around, and so, but I haven't been able to do so successfully.
The most important word in my next question is the word if.
Yes.
If you were to add a 5th R to parenting, what would it be?
I've thought about that, you know. I've thought about a 5th R. And that 5th R for me is resilience. Resilience, being able to bounce back from difficulties, difficult experiences, to be able to survive challenges in challenging situations, to not succumb to challenges or stress, or to just be resilient, because we live in a difficult world, most of us do. And so that resilient, number 5R, that would be the one I would choose. But you know what I think? If you raise your children with these 4 values in mind, trying to have them to inculcate and live out these 4 values, I think that resilience will be an offshoot. Resilient will naturally be an offshoot of these 4 R's.
Not every parenting style is in the child's best interest. Is there
Yes.
such a thing as over-parenting?
I don't know over-parenting. Let me think about it. When you say over-parenting, what do you mean?
In a sense of maybe taking things for granted and probably expecting more of that child, or from that child, I should say.
Oh, yes, definitely. Because some parents do not understand child development. They do not understand the stages of child development, and they have expectations sometimes that may be over and beyond what the child can do intellectually, socially, emotionally. And so they have these expectations that create frustrations and emotional distress for their children, and sometimes often for themselves. So it's important that parents learn the stages of development in the developmental areas of physical, social, emotional, even spiritual development, language development. At what stage do children do this, that, or the other? So you're not going to expect your 6-month-old to get up and walk, even though some children at age 6 may get up and walk. And if your child doesn't walk until he's a year old, like my first child got up when he was a day older than 1 year, and he walked from the bedroom to the front door, and I was behind him hollering and screaming because I thought he was going to walk much earlier. You see? So we've got to know how children grow and develop. Typically, children do this at that time. And by the same token, if my child wasn't walking at age 18 months, I would have been very, very concerned. And I would have sought out professional help in understanding what's going on and assisting my child in the necessary ways.
Absolutely.
Yes.
This global health crisis has affected just about every aspect of society. What
Yes.
with the loss of jobs, businesses closed, some not to ever reopen, lost lives, and the disruption of the way students are being educated today, just to name a few. Dr. Bovell, you have been an educator and involved in academia most of your adult life. What long-lasting effects do you feel the virtual learning today by the younger students will have on society?
Well, I am concerned about primarily the social and emotional aspects of their development, because in order to develop socially and emotionally, according to typical development in those domains, children need to be with other children, their age, younger, older, interacting with them, understanding the problems, the challenges that come out of interacting, learning to make friends, learning to wait your turn, learning to wait for teacher's attention because you're not the only one in the class. And so I feel that being out of school for a year will not have such a major impact because children are resilient for the most part. They know how to bounce back. And so but when they go back to school, I believe they will jump right back in. They will jump right back in and pick up where they left off. So I don't think that it'll have such a major impact. The virtual learning will have a major impact. Now, I'm concerned about their academic development because I don't know. I have not experienced that process, But because children and teacher aren't right there with each other and teacher not observing everything during the course of a day, they may not have a full understanding of where each child is in learning a topic or, process or what have you. So we'll see if it's again this year. And then the children, in terms of social development, and they're not interacting with other children, they're just stuck at home. They're not interacting online. Hopefully, they are interacting online with their peers. But if they're not, then I would be concerned, let's say after about 3 years, and they're stuck. It's not going to be too good for social development.
In writing and compiling this book, The 4 Hours of Parenting, you elicited responses from 42 parents, adults, and young adults.
Yes.
Was there a story that surprised you?
No, not at all. There were stories when interviewing the young adults that really intrigued me. And I wish that I had interviewed more than 6. I had 10 in mind, but I couldn't get hold of the 4, they were kind of either dodging me or not being available, So I interviewed 6 and I was astounded. I was astounded by their openness and their willingness to respond honestly to the questions, especially the first question I asked, which was, will you raise your children the way you were raised? I did not expect any of them to say no. But 5 said no and yes. And 1 said yes. He had no no's. He said yes. But his brother, however, said yes and no. And I was very intrigued by those young adults, their willingness to talk about how disappointed they are about their generation, how some of them speak to the teachers, how they drop their pants, the pants down, pull up your pants, be respectful to your teachers, be respectful to people older than you, how they are calling older people by their first name. And these children are saying this because they were raised to do differently. Somebody older than you is either in the Caribbean culture is auntie, or and the children call me Miss Carmen over here. Some call me Teacher Carmen and so on. And so they don't appreciate, young adults I interviewed really don't appreciate the way their peers behave in those areas.
Unfortunately, bad parenting exists. Parents sometimes indulge in detrimental parenting, leaving a long-lasting effect on the child. It could be unintentional, but the damage is done. No matter how hard you try to fix things, you meet with little success, making you wonder, am I a bad parent? What are some of the severe consequences that result from bad or detrimental parenting?
Well, I would have to look at each area or each value, and I want to begin with respect. If you don't model self-respect and respect for others, and your child learns that attitude of saying whatever they want to whom and beating up other kids, well, that also fits under reciprocity. But if your child doesn't acquire self-respect and respect for others, that child, let's say that child is in school, that child will talk to the teacher anyhow, in any way. I've seen little kids, a 4-year-old white child called the teacher nigger once. I was astounded, but I knew that he heard that maybe his parents or maybe in his yard, at home, in his community. A 5-year-old told the principal the F word, children yelling and screaming at the teacher, don't touch me, you're not me, you're not my mother, get your hands off me. That's how they talk to the teacher. Thank heavens they're in the minority. Most of the children are respectful towards their teachers, but there are a few who they don't know what it is, and so they speak out, lash out, disrespect teacher. In terms of responsibility, they don't help in the classroom to do anything, put away the books that they've played with, that they've used, when you talk about preschool-aged children, 3 to 5, they have a problem cleaning up after themselves in the classroom, putting away the toys, the blocks, and so on that they've used. They don't seem to care. The teacher tells them, and they tell the teacher outright, no. I've experienced those behaviors from young children. And what happens is that no teacher would willingly welcome that child into his or her classroom because they've heard from other teachers the difficulties they had in working with this child. So, hey, I don't want her in my class. I don't want her in my class. And as a leader, supervisor of early childhood programs, I have had to get professional help for many children to teach them socially appropriate behaviors, because children can be very disruptive and destructive. As I said earlier, they're in the minority. You may have 1 or 2 in your classroom, but if you have 5 classrooms in that school, that could be 10 children. And teachers are distracted from implementing the curriculum for the other children in the class.
When we look at the negative influence that society, external forces can have on an individual, that child can have the best parenting at home.
Yes.
How do parents counteract such a situation?
I agree that children could have the best parenting, and then later in their adolescent years, when they want to establish their individuality, they begin to want to establish their independence. They no longer, especially boys, want to be considered a mama's boy. They are more influenced by their peers. And so if they have peers who grew up with negative outcomes, lack of appropriate social behaviors, and their peers are doing exciting things that this child, whose parents have taught him or her to be respectful, responsible, resilient, and so on, then that child may lean more towards the behaviors of their peers, So yes, it does happen. It has happened many times. And so parents become frustrated, disappointed. Some parents move out of neighborhoods because of that, because they want a different sphere of influence for their child. They want to be in neighborhoods where families exhibit the same type of values that they have. And it happens, but my concern is for the lower income parents who may be forced to live in certain neighborhoods because they have no option. They have no option but to stay here. But it means they can't give up. They need to continue working with their child. I mean, we've seen movies. We know situations like that where, and I'm remembering Biggie Smalls, for instance. I saw the movie of his life where his mother was so frustrated about the manner in which he changed once he became a teenager and interacted with people in his neighborhood, and he liked what they were doing, and and he became one of the guys. And that's very typical of the adolescent years, the teenage years, very typical. So parents, I encourage parents not to be discouraged. I have a first cousin who has 5 boys and 2 girls. And she has had such a problem raising the oldest 2 boys. They got into a lot of trouble. And these were nice young men, as we say, nice. But then as they grew older, they got into more and more trouble. And the father didn't do the right thing by those boys. If the father told them to come home at 9 o'clock and it was 9 o'clock and the boys weren't home, you know what he did? He locked the door and locked them out. So they had to sleep in the hallways, or they had to go back to friends in neighborhoods where you don't want your children to be at late hours.
Wow.
So so parents they've got to learn ways of supporting children who need that kind of support. Don't turn your backs on them.
Absolutely.
I told my cousin, I said, girl, look, you need to move move out. And she eventually did, but it was too late. It was too late.
How can one add your book, The 4 Hours of Parenting, to their library?
They can purchase it from Amazon. They can get the paperback, the hardcover. They can even have it on their phones. Ebook, they can purchase the ebook, which is the least expensive of the 3. And if they want to buy an autographed copy of the paperback or the hardcover, they can get in touch with me. My email address is carmelitaebc@yahoo, and I'll spell Carmelita, CarmelitaEBC@yahoo.com.
The professional mission of my guest is, quote, to make a meaningful contribution to the development and implementation of quality early care and education programs for all children, but primarily for economically disadvantaged children in the United States and internationally, unquote. Dr. Carmen Bynoe Bovell, thank you very much for joining me here on the Ron Bobb-Semple International Podcast.
Thank you, Ron. Really appreciate this opportunity. The best to you.
And the best to you also. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending some time with us. If you are so inclined, you can subscribe to these podcasts and donate to them by clicking on the Support the Show button on the website. Please continue to protect yourself and your loved ones during this global pandemic by observing all protocols. Be safe, be strong, and be aware. I'm Ron Bobb-Semple.